Hello and welcome back to the One Shot Show where GMs go to level up. I'm going to take a rest. You take over.
Okay. Hello. Welcome to the One Shot Show where GMs go to level up. We're just taking a little rest right now. Not much is happening.
All right, I'm back.
You right?
Yep. I don't know that I really did enough to warrant that rest, but I'm just saying it's really hard to fit 6 to 8 encounters in between each long rest. I think that's a problem, Patty. I think it's a big problem.
Yeah. I mean, yes. We're talking specifically. We're talking specifically D&D 5th edition.
Dungeons and Dragons motherfucking 5th edition and 5.5 and their goddamn piece of shit rest rules, right? I mean, look, we are not treading new ground here. It is a well-established thing.
I have heard you talk around these rest rules for a while.
I think I mentioned a couple of episodes ago, it's high time that we addressed them head on, took the ox by the horns. Okay, first of all, to lay out the problem. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is built backwards from this conceit that you are going to have 6 to 8 encounters between each long rest, or indeed per adventuring day, because their long rest is your overnight sleep at the end of each day.
Yeah.
And already a short rest is about an hour, all right? There's only 24 fucking hours in a day, so if you're meant to have 2 short rests between each long rest, that's 2 of your hours gone, right? 8 of your hours are spent sleeping, all right? We're already down to 14 hours to get all of that. That's so many. And actually, the problem isn't the in-game time. The problem is not that clock. The problem is the fact that I've got 4 hours on a Sunday, and if I do 6 to 8 encounters, oh my God. Now, just to be clear, encounter doesn't mean combat. Like, when they say 6 to 8 encounters, they don't all have to be like a whole ass combat, and they also don't all have to be as extensive as a combat. An encounter might be as simple as a roleplay scene that has 2 to 3 charisma-based checks, and someone, some bardic inspiration gets spent, some guidances get cast.
A charm person.
It is about expending of resource. That is what it is designed backwards from. The balance between classes that replenish things on a long rest predominantly versus on a short rest predominantly is built backwards from this conceit. The problem is, therefore, if you aren't able to hit the necessary amount of resource expenditure, the balance of the classes starts to fall further out of whack. Now, balance in D&D, indeed in TTRPGs, is not absolute. I want to be clear about that. We are not in the frictionless vacuum of White Room math, right? A class that has very little ability for combat compared to a fighter but can do all these other things as utility out of combat. You can go, oh, well, the one that doesn't do the same numbers in combat is not as bad. It's unbalanced. It's not as good. Shut the goddamn fuck up, all right? But the timings get weird, right? When you only have 1 combat per day and the wizard gets to blow his entire load, and meanwhile the warlock casts like 2 spells and then sits at the back, pew, pew, with their fucking Eldritch Blast like a bitch. That sucks. It's not fun. It's actually not fun for the wizard as well as the warlock. The warlock, it sucks because they don't get to do much. For the wizard, it sucks because they don't actually get to engage in the resource management thing that is meant to be interesting about playing a full spellcaster, where you got to go, do I really want to blow this spell slot on this thing right now, or do I think there's going to be a more important thing later? It all goes. It sucks. It sucks. 5th edition's rest rules are bad.
I'm going to say, because you say that it's built backwards from that basically expenditure of resources point. I think it's built back further. Like, this comes from dungeon delving. I'm sure, because part of the bones of 5e is honoring a legacy system that is about dungeon delving.
A vestigial limb that is no longer even truly present in the game, because as we've mentioned previously, those actual dungeon crawling rules that, if those rules existed, then they would actually probably present opportunities for resources to be getting expended, but they do not exist, so there is no place to expend those resources there. Indeed, the frameworks for most of these encounters do not exist, except for combat, so it's very unclear what resources are meant to be getting expended and when and why and how for the vast majority of these 6 to 8 encounters. But I'm done talking about what sucks. Let's get to fixing them. Because I've mentioned this before, I cannot recommend enough the gritty realism rules. I'm going to blast through them real quick, but actually there's a really profound limitation of them as well, and it comes from exactly the same place. So, with gritty realism, downtime or a long rest is about a week, and a short rest is an overnight. this just it makes the pacing of that 6 to 8 encounter way better. It often actually makes the pacing of your campaign's story much easier to fit in. The world feels a lot more threatening, a lot more deadly, so it really encourages that preparation. Which I think is a really exciting thing for players, because it's like a kind of soft resource management. However, it's very hard to run a dungeon crawl in that mode of gameplay. Like, almost impossible, because a dungeon, you can't rest for a week inside a dungeon. Already when you are dungeon crawling, taking a long rest requires some amount of effort. You need to like board up the walls and make sure you are in a very secure spot. And that means if you've got really down to the wire on a particular encounter, but you know that you're nearly through this dungeon, okay, maybe we can figure out a way to take a long rest here. Or even just taking short rests in the middle of a dungeon when it's, half an hour to an hour to sit down and eat a fucking sandwich, compared to doing an overnighter in a dungeon maybe 2 to 3 times before it's in. It's just not possible. Dungeons kind of break the whole resting system if you take gritty realism, and that's not going to suit a game called Dungeons and Dragons. So how do we fix it, Patty? Do you from like laying out of the problem, because like I've got a fix. I've genuinely got a fix. What's your fix?
I'm so excited to hear. I mean, I've seen what are some of the things that my big West marches that I did, we did long rests, a long rest between session. You can never long rest during a session because every adventure was like a delve into a particular city. Everything had to be dealt out with. A short rest was also never a guarantee. A short rest was basically an invitation for a dangerous encounter, like most of the time because of the nature of the setting. But yeah, I've always danced around and grappled with the resting rules. I remember when I played Baldur's Gate 3, I was kind of like, I don't mind this idea of like a short rest just being like
click a button, have it.
Yeah, click a button, have it, but you can only do it twice. Yeah. Like the idea of like really putting limitations on it. But I've always had to find a solve for them, or I've had to have players who have really struggled with them. Like a bard who is afraid, who doesn't want to be casting their spells in a social encounter, despite the fact that's what they're built for, because they're afraid of because they're nervous of the boss encounter that will come along.
Exactly.
And they know that my cadence of resting as a GM isn't suiting what they're playing at the moment. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you mentioned Baldur's Gate 3 in there, because that's, esoterically at least, that's at the heart of what I think the fix actually requires. I understand that 5th edition was looking for a kind of streamlinedness that resulted in them removing a lot of gamification, which I think was a misstep. It's why you have things like removing keywords and focusing on natural language. It's actually a big reason why a lot of the systems for things like exploration aren't really in the game. It's because they didn't want everything to be like super granular. They didn't want to have like a chunky rules packet for every tiny fucking thing you wanted to do, compared to how it worked in certain older editions, predominantly sort of 3.5 and 3rd ed. I think it goes a step too far, though, because we lack frameworks for even something as simple as resting, and actually the solve requires, in my opinion, accepting a level of gamification. Now, I think it is a fundamental solve. I do not think there is a single RPG system that can reasonably exist that might require some moment where your resources are replenished that does not that doesn't have an amount of gamification. It has to exist. As you say, Baldur's Gate's fix was, here's the button you press to short rest. It happens immediately, and you can only press it twice before you need a long rest again. It's just baking in mechanics.
Daggerheart has also a really cool way of like a short rest. You can either replenish one of your 3 major resource pools, or you can gain some hope, or you can tinker on something. And it's based like it comes down to a die roll. Like you restore 1d4 hit points. It becomes this interesting conversation between the players about the rest, and then it's also gamified because when the players rest, you as a GM gain fear, which is your danger resource.
Exactly.
So it becomes a game conversation.
There's a meta trade-off for the players,
but also like not one that feels not fun.
Yeah. Because in 5th edition, the only thing stopping your party from short resting after every single minor encounter that pops along their way is the soft mechanical the soft narrative mumbo jumbo of you, the GM, finding a reason that that's not possible.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of extra work to do on top of all the other goddamn work you're already doing as a GM. My fix, and this is as someone who, when I do run 5th edition, which isn't much these days, I run with the gritty realism rules, but I accept a level of gamification. I call it the dungeon state. When we enter a dungeon, when you played like old school Legend of Zelda games, there was an overworld and there were like these little dungeons.
Yes, absolutely.
Like it's literally, I think of it as like we've exited the overworld of this campaign where gritty realism rules apply. We are now in the dungeon, and that means dungeon rules apply.
The system adjusts to accommodate. That's cool.
Then we use the standard resting rules. Short rest is, half an hour to an hour. Long rest is an overnight sleep, right? It just suits dungeon delving so much better, just flatly from how it's designed. I then also, as we talked about with the Where the Fuck Are the Dungeon Crawl Rules episode way back, I also introduce those when we are in a dungeon. Like, I am willing to accept that gamification because we want to have dungeon crawls in our game. De-gamifying it doesn't make those dungeon crawls more immersive. It actually just makes them harder to include in the first place, which means when they do get included, they're so rules light as to be themselves incongruous with the imagined fantasy of doing a dungeon crawl. It actually feels less immersive, despite having this idea of like lighter mechanics.
Yeah, and you do that thing of like you truly break the game into like essentially sort of 3 pillars, which is you've got exploration, which is your outer world. Sorry, you've got social, which is sort of your outer world, which is like I don't know, you're consulting with your shopkeeps, you're making your decisions as a party. You've got exploration, which is you sinking into your dungeon crawl mechanics, and then you've got your combat, which is when the encounter begins, when initiative is rolled.
Yeah, and I accept dungeon crawling as sort of this sub-format of combat and exploration.
Yeah.
Right? It is its own thing that needs to abide by its own rules, because it obviously does, right? Like, storming storming a mansion that has been overtaken by insurgents to free the captured king is very different to crossing 3 days through a dangerous bog, right? Like, those are 2 obviously different things that require different skills. Different characters are going to shine. They're completely different modes of narrative, let alone gameplay. We should be willing to accept that the rules, therefore, can shift a little bit to better suit them, right? I think trying to avoid doing that, trying to have this overly broad, overly loose approach that 5th edition landed on, creates a lot of problems. And I think they are problems that every single GM everywhere ever that tries to run Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition bumps into and has to figure out a solution for. This is my one. You're welcome to use it. I'd recommend you do, because it's honestly very straightforward. It's very simple. If you think that your players will not accept the weird narrative conceit of like, okay, guys, dungeon mode starts now.
There's a jump that you have to make in your verse. Yeah.
But we accept that already when we say everyone roll initiative.
Yeah.
We accept switching into different modes of gameplay that have different rules governing them already.
Yeah.
It would be silly to think that we can't handle any others.
So I wonder if that's also a problem. The more I've been running other systems, the more I've been coming to appreciate how symmetrical Dungeons and Dragons tries to be in terms of like the system that the players are engaging with, the system that the GM is engaging with, the names of the sort of roles and the sort of resources. Yeah, it's just so fascinating because I've been running systems where those things are different. Yeah, and I've been finding the systeminess of other systems quite liberating.
So the thing with that in 5th edition as well, and look, to be honest, this is going a little bit beyond the remit of what this topic is, but I think I've kind of covered it, and this is an interesting corollary to it. To actually run the games that I'm able to run in 5th edition, which I, to suck my own dick, are pretty fucking good. I'm already doing that. I'm already giving myself different rules to the players, right? Magical effects happen in the game that are not a spell that exists in the rulebook, and they are not a thing that the wizard would be able to learn, even though their rules say you can learn any spell. No, not this one. You can't. Why? Because I'm the GM, right? I get to do what I need to, and that's how I put it. This is what I need to do to serve you a worthwhile game that is better than what just running it by the book would actually deliver you. I can go back to doing that, and you know what? These kinds of magical effects are going to disappear from the game entirely.
Yeah.
It's just going to be, it's actually illusory terrain, and it's a spell you already have, and they're like, oh, okay, that's not very interesting.
Yeah, and then it becomes this strange, almost, it's so fascinating. I feel it because, it can become a combative dialogue where everybody is so deeply knowledgeable of the same thing that that they're jamming it out.
I will also say, just as a final note, once you are willing to accept the gamification of changing between rest states, resting rules, man, the possibilities. I had what was essentially the big final battle moment that was, for a particular campaign, that was a keep under siege from, a dragon and an army of undead, and like every kind of crazy big monster. And the party had been given potions that they could drink that would change their rest rules to the heroic rest rules, which are a short rest is 5 minutes, a long rest is 1 hour.
Yeah.
That meant over the course of this like crazy gauntlet of insane combat, so it's like, we've got this fight here, and then I'm going to duck for a second, to take a short rest. Everyone's going to do that. We've got to go back into the next phase of this fight against this one enemy.
Game of Thrones, you just cut into the character sitting in a room for just a moment.
They fell the thing that's there, and then the horn blows at the other end of the keep, and there's the call to redeploy. We've got about an hour before we have to muster over there. Long rest. Cool. Right? And it meant that it could still happen in the course of this one, this one day-long siege. It just made the time work really well for the narrative. That's what it's doing for you.
And also made the characters feel as powerful as they could possibly be.
Exactly.
Because they can over almost everything.
Exactly.
How exciting.
It was absolutely gripping, absolutely thrilling.
I think we've earned it now.
Yeah.
I think we've earned it.
We've earned the rest.
We've earned the rest.
This is, and I need one. My voice certainly needs a rest. Thank you very much for listening to my bullshit for another 15 minutes, and we will see you in the next one. Hello, dear listener. If you're enjoying listening to The One Shot Show, we'd love to have you on a Discord server. Get in touch with us over our socials or email and we'll give you an invite link. If you back us on Patreon, you'll get some additional stuff in that Discord server, such as contributing questions to our live monthly Q&A sessions where we go over last month's episodes. If you back us on Patreon, you'll also get access to a whole bunch of other stuff, such as bonus episodes and all sorts of other cool things. Go ahead and check it out, and thanks for listening.